Welcome back to Quick Bites. I'm Lauren Adbrand, your retail real estate expert. I've worked in development and operations my entire career. I'm here to share my insights on navigating your retail portfolio. Whether you're new to the industry or your primary focus is not retail, then this series is for you. Today, I'm going to share my tips on preparing a new lease. The first thing we're going to talk about is the concepts in the lease. There are tons of them. Negotiating and comprehending dozens of concepts in a retail lease is not easy. These documents are anywhere from 25 to 75 pages in length, and they address nearly any scenario that could arise during the lease term. And lawyers love to write in legalese instead of plain English, which most of us speak. So in this episode, I'm going to break down my top 5 tips in preparing and negotiating a retail lease. Some of these concepts are pre-negotiated as part of your LOI, but the lease is going to further define and clarify each of those terms, as well as any other operating covenants. And as you can see, there are quite a few. So tip number 1 is to start from the form. So whether you're using a generic statutory lease or a custom property specific lease that your attorneys have drafted, you should always start from the form. Do not use a previous lease that you have drafted for a different deal for this deal, because that is how silly mistakes are going to start happening. If you start from the form and you track changes, it makes for a much cleaner negotiation. So start with your executed LOI and enter the already agreed upon terms to their respective lease sections. The initial draft is going to be easy to compile. The only modifications on the form are going to be the deal-specific terms from your LOI. Now, the tenant's attorney is likely to make modifications to the form language in their redraft. This is fine, as long as they're redlining and replacing the existing language with clear and concise new language. It's a negotiation. Both parties should understand what the non-negotiables are versus what can be modified. So here's an example. A landlord is unlikely to remove language about lender subordination, estoppels, and SNDAs, because those documents are required by lenders to receive financing or to sell the property. But what is negotiable is the time period in which a tenant has to respond to those requests, any fees that might be associated with completing them, and what the penalty would be for non-compliance. You can see in this example, the concept itself is non-negotiable, but the mechanism for which it's fulfilled is. Tip number 2, accuracy matters. There are a lot of people involved in these phases of the lease, and everyone has an opinion. A lot of alternate lease terms can be negotiated in and out during this phase. This graphic illustrates the natural progression of getting a lease in place from when a tenant finds their broker to when it gets executed and handed to the property manager. The only document the property manager will use to administer the lease is the executed lease. Everything else that came before it doesn't matter because the LOI was non-binding, remember? It's imperative to give the operations team a complete document with accurate information so they can do their jobs properly. As a former property manager, I regularly received leases that didn't have contact information, the square footages didn't match, the rent table wasn't rounding correctly, and a multitude of other lazy mistakes. From all of these, my biggest request is to ensure contact information is up to date and accurate. It is impossible to start communicating with a tenant if there is no contact information. And once the lease gets signed, the property manager is now the primary contact, not the lawyers, not the brokers. So again, accuracy matters. Tip number 3 is to clearly define the terms. It is important that the lease has clear definitions. What is the difference between the effective date, the target delivery date, the outside delivery date, the possession date, the time to complete tenant's work, the rent commencement date, the penalty period, and what counts as part of the term and what doesn't? You see where I'm going here? A retail lease has many concepts that require clear definitions for your operations team to properly administer. Words matter. If your work letter states the landlord will deliver the space in a vanilla box condition, define what that means. If they're delivering a shell with conduits in place to run MEPs, ensure they're in the premises and not near the premises. Those words have different meanings, and tying into a system that is stubbed into the premises versus near the premises has financial implications. Tip number 4 is to understand your timelines. There's anywhere from 3 to 24 months passing when a lease gets signed and a tenant opens for business. It is rare that there is no work to be done at all. Sometimes the landlord will deliver a turnkey space and the tenant just needs to stock and open, but other times the landlord hasn't even built the building yet. When you're working on a lease for a space that isn't ready yet, there are a lot of triggers and timelines to manage. Be sure you understand the landlord's role and the tenant's role during this phase. Some of these might mean the same thing, and some of them might be conflicting. It can be very complicated, so be sure you're clearly defining these terms and the trigger dates. Helpful language to avoid pitfalls would be the rent commencement date shall be the earlier of the date the tenant opens for business to the public or the day following the expiration of the time to complete tenant's work. Notice there are no hard dates in there. Help your operations team out by making these timelines as clear as possible. Tip number 5 is to make sure you understand your lease. Do yourself a favor. Once the terms are negotiated and the execution copies are being prepared, abstract the lease. Make sure you have a working understanding of the obligations and the timelines to fulfill them, or else you can find yourself in default and having no idea how you got there. I cannot tell you how many times I have been handed an executed lease as a property manager and the tenant claims they are unaware of their obligations. Read your lease. Understand your lease. If you don't understand it, ask questions before you sign it, not after. Thanks for having another quick bite with me. If this was helpful and you enjoyed any part of it, please like, share, subscribe, add my channel, or comment below. As always, I'm not going to respond to any negativity, but I will respond to constructive feedback. If there's a topic you want me to cover, just leave it in the comments and I'll add it to my list. See you later.